I was 24 at the time and had just moved into a duplex on the edge of a small town in Washington state. The place wasn't anything fancy, but it was mine hardwood floors, a small front porch, and a glass sliding door that led to a fenced backyard. The one downside: my neighbor had moved out the week before I arrived, which meant the other half of the duplex was empty. It had been raining for 2 days straight when this happened. Not just light rain either, this was heavy, curtain-thick rain that made the whole neighborhood feel abandoned. I had the day off and was settling in with a frozen pizza and a true crime doc on Netflix when I heard a soft knock on the sliding glass door behind me. At first, I assumed it was the rain hitting the glass, or maybe the wind shifting something in the yard. But then it came again, 3 deliberate taps. Not loud, but enough to stop me cold. I turned around slowly. Through the sheer curtains, I could see the shape of someone standing just outside in the rain. I froze. The yard was completely fenced. There was no way to get in unless they had gone through the gate. I didn't move, just stared through the glass, heart hammering. The figure was tall and motionless. He was wearing a soaked hooded jacket, and I could barely make out his face. But I could see he was looking straight into the room. He didn't knock again. I reached for my phone, but realized I'd left it charging upstairs. Stupid, I stepped back, careful not to make any sudden movements. That's when the motion sensor porch light turned on, and he was gone. Not just moved, completely gone. I rushed to the kitchen window, trying to see if he'd walked out the side gate, but nothing. No one was there. I went upstairs, locked the bedroom door behind me, and waited for any sign of movement. An hour passed, then 2. I kept checking the backyard through the window, but never saw him again. When I finally went back downstairs, just after midnight, I noticed something I hadn't before. Right near the glass door, on the outside, were muddy footprints. Not going away from the door, but toward it, and right next to the handle. Smeared across the wet glass was a handprint. A handprint made from the inside. I was 19 and had just moved into a small basement apartment my cousin offered me on the cheap. It was underneath his house, a separate entrance, kitchenette, bathroom, and just enough room for a bed and desk. I didn't mind the size. I was just grateful to have somewhere to stay while I saved up for school. It was early spring, and that week we were hit with some of the worst rain I'd seen in years. The kind that pounds against the windows so hard it sounds like static. The gutters overflowed, and the whole street turned into a river by the end of the night. The weird thing started on a Thursday. It was a little after 10 p.m. I'd just finished eating and was washing my dish in the sink when I noticed the drain making a strange noise. Not the usual gurgling, this was deeper. More like something shifting or being dragged. I turned off the water and leaned closer. It was faint, but I swear I could hear a voice. A low murmur echoing up from the pipes. I couldn't make out any words. Just this whispering rhythm like someone talking to themselves down a long hallway. I stayed there for a solid minute, just listening, and then it stopped. I figured maybe the rain had backed something up, or water was trapped somewhere. I didn't think too much of it at the time, but the next night it happened again. Only this time, it didn't wait for me to turn on the faucet. I was getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth, when I heard it, that same low whisper, but now coming from the bathroom sink. I shut the water off and leaned in, heart already racing. And it was definitely a voice, still muffled, still distant, but it was repeating something. I leaned in further, trying to make it out, and right as I got close, too close, Something slammed hard against the inside of the drain. I jumped back, practically falling over the toilet behind me. The sound was like a palm slapping metal from the inside. I watched the drain for another minute, frozen. The whisper was gone. Just silence now. I didn't sleep much that night. By Saturday, I was starting to feel like I was going crazy. I didn't mention anything to my cousin upstairs. I didn't want to sound insane. I just tried to ignore it. But that night, everything escalated. It was close to midnight when I got out of the shower. The mirror was fogged. The rain was still hammering outside, and the air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me. I reached to wipe the mirror, and that's when I heard it. Again, the whispering. But this time, it wasn't from the sink. It was behind me. I turned so fast, I almost slipped. Nothing was there, but I could hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, walking across the concrete floor outside the bathroom. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped out. There were wet footprints, bare feet, leading from the kitchen sink to the hallway. And the worst part, they weren't coming from the door. They were coming from the sink. I followed them, slowly, all the way to my bedroom. The footprints stopped right at the edge of the bed. I stood there for a second, then ducked down to look underneath. Nothing, but when I stood back up, there were handprints on the ceiling, as if someone had been crawling above me. I packed a bag that night and left without telling my cousin. I didn't even lock the door behind me. He didn't believe a word of it when I tried to explain the next day. Said the rain probably messed with the pipes. I don't know what it was, maybe I don't want to know, but I never went back to that basement again. I was 21 and living in a rented cottage out in the countryside of Oregon. It was isolated, the kind of place you'd only find if you were looking for it. The road in was gravel, lined with towering trees on both sides. My closest neighbor was nearly 2 miles away from me. It was perfect, quiet, cheap, and surrounded by woods. That week had been especially rainy days without a break. The kind of storm where everything stays damp, your shoes, your walls, even the air inside your house. I was working a remote job and didn't go out much anyway, so the weather didn't bother me until Thursday night. It was a little after 11 p.m. I was reading on the couch, the rain tapping constantly against the windows. I didn't have any music on, no TV, just silence and the storm. That's probably the only reason I even heard it. A tapping, not rain this time, a different rhythm, more deliberate, like someone lightly touching the glass with their finger. I looked toward the window by the kitchen. Nothing, but the sound came again, softer this time. Tap, tap, tap. I stood up, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. Every window had condensation on the inside, so I couldn't see clearly through them. I stepped closer, squinting into the darkness, and that's when I saw it. A handprint, small, like a child's, pressed on the outside of the glass. It was low, too low for an adult to make, unless they were crouching. I froze there for a second before rushing to the front door and locking the deadbolt, even though I'd already locked it hours ago. Then I grabbed my flashlight and looked to no one. I checked all the windows, nothing, but I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the couch, staring at that same window, watching the rain streak past the handprint until the sun came up the next day. I tried to forget about it, told myself maybe it was already there and I just noticed it during the storm, maybe. Condensation made it stand out, maybe. But then came Friday night, same time, same tapping. This time, I didn't move. I just sat still and listened. The tapping traveled from the back window to to the side window, to the front, one after another, like someone slowly circling the cottage. I turned off all the lights, sat in the dark, barely breathing. At one point, it stopped completely. I waited. Nothing, no tapping, no sound but the storm. But then something new happened. I heard breathing just outside the wall behind me, right where the bedroom was slow, raspy, like someone had just run a long way and was trying to stay quiet. Then I heard my bedroom door creak open, except I hadn't left it closed. That's when I realized the back door. I never double-checked the back door. I didn't even grab my flashlight. I just ran out the front door, barefoot, into the pouring rain, and didn't stop until I reached the tree line. I stood there in the dark, soaked, heart pounding, waiting for something to follow me out, but nothing came. The next morning, I went back. The house was exactly how I left it, except for one thing. In the bedroom, scratched into the wall above my bed, were 5 little words. I watched you last night. This happened when I was 23 and renting a 2-story townhouse just outside Denver. It was an old place, but the rent was good, and I was used to doing minor maintenance myself. I lived alone, worked night shifts at a hospital, and usually slept through the day. The quiet helped, but one thing about the house always made me uneasy: the attic. It was a square wooden panel in the ceiling above the upstairs hallway. No ladder, no string to pull it down. You had to get up there with a step stool and push it open manually. I never did. I didn't even own a ladder tall enough. So for the entire first year I lived there, I just ignored it. But one night during a relentless downpour in mid-April, something changed. I'd just gotten home from work. It was almost 2 a.m. and the storm had been shaking the house for hours. I was soaked, dead tired, and ready to crash as I climbed the stairs. I paused near the top. The hallway was lit up. The attic light, a dull yellow bulb I had never used, was on. I stopped cold, staring up at it through the cracked square panel. There was a soft glow pushing through the edges. I hadn't even known there was a bulb up there, let alone a working one. I stood there for a full minute, trying to make sense of it. Then I told myself maybe a circuit had flipped, old wiring, weird storm interference. I wanted to believe that. I went to bed. But when I woke up around 10 a.m., the light was off again. It stayed off for days after that. I checked it every night after work. Nothing until the next Friday. Same storm, same time, same light. Only this time, the attic panel wasn't just glowing, it was shifted, like someone had pushed it slightly open from the inside. I stared up at it again, heart thudding, trying to decide whether to go back down the stairs or grab the broom and push it shut in the end. I walked back to the couch downstairs and stayed up all night. The next day, I bought a stepladder. I wasn't brave enough to open the attic yet, but I left the ladder in the hallway, just in case. Then Sunday night came another storm, harder than the last. Thunder shaking the windows, lights flickering in the living room. I walked upstairs, slowly. The hallway was dark, but the attic light was on again, and this time the panel was fully pushed open, tilted to one side. I grabbed the stepladder and climbed up slowly. I told myself it was just to shut it and be done with it. I reached the top, hand shaking as I pressed the panel back into place. But then I heard it shuffling, from inside, like fabric scraping across wood, and then breathing, not loud, but shallow and hoarse. Someone was in the attic. I backed down the ladder and sprinted to my bedroom, locking the door. I grabbed my phone and called the cops. I didn't leave the room until I heard them knocking downstairs. When they arrived, they opened the attic. No one was there, but what they did find made it worse. A blanket, a water bottle, empty food wrappers, and a small handheld lantern, still warm from being on. There were signs someone had been living up there for a while, maybe coming down when I was at work, maybe even watching me. The police suspected it was a squatter who found a way in before I moved, and used the storms and noise to cover their movements. But I don't buy that, because of one thing they never figured out. There was no way into the attic from outside, no windows, no roof access, no broken panels. Whoever it was had been living inside the house the entire time, and they only ever turned on the light when I came home. This happened 2 years ago, when I was living in a rental house in rural Pennsylvania. I was in between jobs, going through a rough patch, and needed to get out of the city. I found this place online, a small one-story house with a long gravel driveway and nothing but woods behind it. It rained almost every day that spring, and this story took place during one of those long, grey weeks where it felt like the sky never dried out. It was around 8 p.m. on a Tuesday. I'd just finished dinner and was cleaning up when I noticed the motion light in the driveway flick on. At first I figured it was just the wind, or maybe a deer. It happened sometimes, but I glanced out the front window anyway, just to be sure. And that's when I saw him. A man standing at the far end of my driveway, just outside the reach of the light. He wasn't moving, just standing there in the rain, facing the house. I couldn't make out much, just the silhouette of someone wearing a long coat, or maybe a poncho. His hands were by his sides, still like he was waiting. I watched for maybe 20 seconds. Then, without warning, he took a slow step forward, not toward the road, toward me. I backed away from the window and turned off the living room light, hoping maybe he didn't see me yet. The motion light shut off again, and when I peeked back through the blinds, he was gone. No footsteps, no car, just empty rain. I should have called the police, but something told me not to, not yet. I kept convincing myself it was some weirdo who got lost, or thought my place was someone else's. But at 10:34 p.m., the motion light flicked on again. This time, I didn't go to the window. I just crouched near the couch and listened. After about a minute, there was a light knock on the front door. 3 slow knocks, then silence. Then again, 3 more. I stood up, heart in my throat, and looked through the peephole. And I'll never forget what I saw. The man was standing there, soaked from head to toe. His coat clung to him like wet plastic, and he was smiling. Not a normal smile, this was stretched, wide like someone holding their mouth open with invisible hooks. He didn't speak, didn't move, just smiled. I backed away and grabbed my phone, but as soon as I turned around, the knocking stopped. I went back to look through the peephole again. He was gone. The cop showed up 20 minutes later and did a sweep of the property. No sign of anyone, no footprints in the mud, nothing. But the officer asked me something that stuck with me ever since. He said, "You're sure he was knocking on the front door?" Yeah, I told him. Why? And he said, "Because we found handprints on the back sliding door." I moved out 2 days later, but sometimes, even now, I swear I still see him in my dreams, just standing at the end of the driveway, smiling. I was 25 and living in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Knoxville. My house was part of an older development, a line of small ranch-style homes from the 70s, nothing fancy, just a row of tired roofs and overgrown yards. I liked it because it was quiet. too quiet sometimes. This happened on a Friday night during a storm. It had been raining non-stop for hours, and thunder kept rumbling off in the distance. I'd just finished a movie and was getting ready for bed, when I noticed my bedroom window was slightly open. Just a crack, but enough that water had started to drip onto the sill. I went over, pulled it shut, and locked it. That's when I noticed something. There were muddy smears just below the glass, thin streaks running down the outer siding, like someone had touched the wall with wet fingers. I told myself it had to be runoff from the gutters, or something even. Though it was oddly symmetrical, 5 vertical streaks, like a hand had been pressed there. It made me feel uneasy, but not scared. Not yet. Later that night, around 2 a.m., I was lying in bed when I heard something outside. A voice. It was faint, a whisper, but I could tell it was close, too close. I sat up and turned off the fan. The room went quiet. Then I heard it again. "Ah, you awake?" It came from right outside my window. I shot up and stared across the dark room. I wanted to believe I was dreaming. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. "Hello," the voice asked again, soft, raspy. "I know you're in there." I grabbed my phone and slid off the bed, crawling toward the hallway. I didn't want to risk making noise by walking. I reached the kitchen and called 911, barely able to breathe. As I whispered into the phone, I heard tapping, gentle, rhythmic, tap, tap, tap. It moved from the bedroom window to the dining room window, then the back one near the laundry room. Whoever it was, they were circling the house. By the time the police arrived, the tapping had stopped. The windows were fogged from the rain, but there were streaks across the glass, just like before. 5 finger smears in perfect lines. They searched the yard, found nothing, but they did find footprints, a full set, barefoot. They started near the fence, walked all the way around the house, then stopped. No prints going back, just a single path leading to my window. And then they were gone. No one was ever caught. And the strangest part, the smears under the bedroom window, the ones I saw before any of this happened, were gone when I checked the next morning, completely washed away, almost like they'd only been visible when he was there, and now that he was gone, they didn't want to be found. This happened about 4 years ago. I was house-sitting for my aunt and uncle while they were on vacation in Arizona. They lived in a quiet suburb in Connecticut, the kind of neighborhood with wide lawns, quiet streets, and old wooden fences. Every house looked similar, and every yard had at least one tree taller than the roof. The rain had been falling all week, and by Thursday night, the yard was a swamp. I was stuck inside with nothing to do, flipping between old TV reruns and mindless. Scrolling on my phone. Their guest room, where I was staying, faced the backyard. The windows were tall and wide, too wide, honestly. No curtains, just white pulled-down blinds. That night, I was lying in bed watching videos on my phone when I noticed something strange. The blinds were moving. Just a slight sway back and forth. Barely there, but enough to catch my eye. The window wasn't open. The air conditioning wasn't on. Nothing should have been causing it. I got up and pulled the blinds all the way up. Outside, everything was soaked. Rain still fell in sheets. The backyard lights reflected off the puddles near the patio, but nothing looked out of place. No animals, no movement. I figured maybe it was just the house settling. Or maybe I'd left a vent open somewhere. I went back to bed, but about an hour later, I woke up to something else. A sound, like soft breathing. Very close. I sat up. The room was dark, except for the blinking blue light of the smoke detector. The breathing continued slow, rhythmic, and definitely inside the room. I held my breath, and that's when I saw it. A shape. In the far corner, just next to the dresser, motionless. Too tall to be furniture, too still to be anything natural. My phone was still beside me on the bed, but I didn't dare reach for it. I just stared, frozen. Then the shape moved. A step, just one. It stepped into the faint glow of the night light in the hallway. It was a man, drenched, mud covering his clothes, his hands, his feet bare, his eyes wide and unmoving. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the wall above the bed, as if there was something there only he could see. Then, without a sound, he turned around and walked out of the room. Just walked out like he belonged there. I grabbed my phone and bolted into the master bathroom, locking the door and calling 911. When the police arrived, the man was gone, but the trail he left behind told everything. There were muddy footprints from the backyard, over the wet patio, through the unlocked back door, footprints that led into the guest room, and then back outside, again. But here's the part one still can't explain. He didn't steal anything. He didn't touch anything. All he did was stand in that corner and watch. The wall, like something in that room was calling to him. Something that had nothing to do with me. I was 26 when this happened. I'd just bought my first house, a small fixer-upper, in a quiet cul-de-sac outside Richmond, Virginia. It wasn't in perfect shape, but it had a decent yard, a big kitchen, and a detached garage that sat at the end of a long, cracked driveway. The previous owner told me the garage door could be a little temperamental. Sometimes it didn't latch right. I figured it was just old hardware and planned to replace it eventually. But during the first month I lived there, it hadn't given me any problems. Until one stormy night in June. The rain had started around. Sunset, thick, heavy drops, pounding on the roof and windows. I was in the kitchen, finishing up dishes, when I heard a dull thud from outside. I paused, listening. A second later, thud again. It was coming from the back. I walked to the mudroom door that led to the backyard, flipped on the porch light, and looked out. The garage door was wide open, not just unlatched, fully open. I hadn't touched it in 2 days. I slipped on my rain jacket and went out into the storm. The gravel was soft under my shoes, and the sound of the rain hitting the metal roof was deafening. I stepped inside the garage, found the cord to close the door, and gave it a firm tug. The door slammed shut with a loud clang. I pulled on the handle to test the latch. Seemed secure. But the moment I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A wet footprint, not mine. It was on the cement floor, barefoot, angled toward the door leading into the side of the garage. I followed the prints, heart thudding, but they just stopped. They didn't go out the other side. Didn't circle back. They just vanished halfway across the floor. I checked the corners, the shelves, behind the old workbench. Nothing. I left the garage fast, locked the mudroom door, and went back inside, trying to convince myself the wind had pushed the garage door open. Maybe some neighborhood kid was messing around that night. Around 1 a.m., I woke up to a metallic sound, a grinding, low-pitched groan, like old springs under strain. I jumped out of bed, ran to the back window, and saw it. The garage door was open, again, and this time, the light inside the garage was flickering. I didn't go outside. I stayed in the living room with the lights off, and waited with my phone in hand, but nothing else happened. The next morning, when the rain finally stopped, I went out again. The door was open, like before, but now there were 2 sets of footprints, one leading in, one leading out. And here's what chilled me to the bone. The second set was smaller, narrower, like a child's eye. Called a local locksmith that afternoon and had the whole door removed and replaced. I never saw the prints again, but for weeks afterward, when the rain would start falling, I'd wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, positive I heard the door creak open. This happened when I was 20. I was renting a rundown apartment on the second floor of a duplex in a small town in northern Ohio. The place was old, creaky floors, drafty windows, paper-thin walls. But it was cheap, and at that time, that's all I could afford. The rain had been going for almost a week straight. Heavy and constant, it felt like the whole world had turned grey. I didn't have internet, so I spent a lot of nights just watching TV. I had an old box-style television I found at a thrift store, one of those with the dial and static channels. That night, it was around midnight. I'd fallen asleep on the couch. With the TV on, I woke up to white noise, full static, loud and hissing. I looked at the screen. It was stuck on channel 3. I never used channel 3. It was just snow, it never picked anything up. I reached for the remote and tried changing it, but nothing worked. I even walked over and tried using the manual buttons on the front. Still stuck dart. Then something changed. In the middle of the static there was a shape, faint, blurred, but I could see the outline of someone standing in a dark room. At first I thought maybe the signal had picked up an old broadcast or something bleeding through, but it wasn't a broadcast, because the figure moved, slowly, deliberately, toward the screen. The static got louder, higher pitched, almost like a shriek buried in white noise. Then, in a single blink, the screen cut to black. I stood there, frozen, breathing hard. The TV clicked off on its own. No power button, no remote, just off. The rest of the apartment was quiet. No thunder, no creaks. Just rain tapping against the windows. I sat back down, trying to calm myself. But then, from the floor below, I heard it. A loud, echoing static hiss. The exact same sound from my TV. The problem was, the downstairs unit was vacant, had been for months. No one was living there. I tiptoed to my bedroom, shut the door, and waited the rest of the night out with the lights on. The next morning, I went downstairs and peeked through the curtain on the front window of the lower unit. The place was still, empty, but in the middle of the room was a small, old box TV. Plugged in, turned on, tuned to channel 3. This happened last year. I'm 30 now, and my wife and I had just moved into a new house after the birth of our first child, a baby girl named Claire. The house was in a quiet neighborhood outside Asheville, North Carolina. 2 bedrooms, fenced, backyard, and a nursery that overlooked the street. Claire was only 3 months old when it happened. It was a stormy night, thick, heavy rain, the kind that makes every wall feel thinner than it should be. The baby had finally gone to sleep after hours of fussing. My wife passed out on the couch, exhausted. I stayed up in the kitchen, cleaning bottles and scrolling through my phone. Around 1:30 a.m., the baby monitor sitting quietly on the counter crackled to life, not with crying, not with static, with a voice. At first, I thought it was Claire, making noises in her sleep, maybe babbling, but as I turned to look at the monitor's screen, I froze. The nursery camera feed showed a man standing in the far corner of the room, not moving, not facing the crib, just standing, his back to the wall, his face angled slightly down. I stared at the monitor, completely paralyzed. My first instinct was to run upstairs to get my daughter, but something about what I was seeing made my body lock up. The voice came again through the speaker. It was low, raspy, male. "I see you, Claire." My heart slammed in my chest. I snapped out of it and ran upstairs as fast as I could. I burst into the nursery, ready to throw myself between my daughter and whoever was in there. But the room was empty. Completely dot, Claire was sleeping soundly in her crib. The window was closed. No sign of forced entry. No wet footprints. Nothing. I grabbed her and brought her downstairs. My wife woke up to me holding our daughter with shaking hands, pale as a ghost. I told her what I saw, what I heard. We went back, upstairs together, checked everything. Still nothing but the baby monitor feed. The man was gone, just static now. I took the monitor apart that night, unscrewed every panel. I didn't want to leave a single piece untouched. But as I pried the speaker casing open, I found something lodged inside. A tiny, folded piece of paper. It was dampled. I unfolded it and read the words written in shaky ink. "She's mine now." We moved out less than a week later. I was 28 when I inherited my grandfather's old house after he passed. It wasn't a mansion or anything, just a small two-bedroom place at the edge of a sleepy town in Vermont. The kind of place where the fog settles between the trees, and the only thing louder than the silence is the rain. I didn't know him well growing up, but when I got the call from the estate lawyer, I didn't hesitate to accept the property. I was between jobs and didn't have much tying me down. A free place to live sounded like a blessing. The house hadn't been touched in months. The yard was overgrown and the roof had a minor leak, but overall it was in decent shape. Most of the furniture had been covered with dusty sheets, and everything inside smelled faintly of mildew and old wood. Still, I felt a strange sense of comfort walking through those halls, like I had stepped into a memory that didn't belong to me. One thing that stood out was the radio. It sat on the kitchen counter, an old silver Crossley with rounded edges and real knobs, the kind with an actual dial instead of buttons. My grandfather used to listen to baseball games on it, apparently, and I'd catch him tuning it late at night whenever I visited as a kid. I never thought much of it then. The radio wasn't plugged in. I hadn't even tried to use it since I moved in. It was just there, like a part of the house, a relic that nobody touched, but no one dared throw away either. About a week into living there, it started to rain. Not just a drizzle, a full and spring downpour. Sheets of water pounding the windows, gutters overflowing, wind pushing against the back door. I stayed inside all evening, sorting boxes and watching the sky darken until the whole house felt swallowed in shadows. It was around 11:30 when I first heard it. I was brushing my teeth, the rain thudding steadily against the bathroom window, when I heard static faint at first, then louder, a hiss, like a radio between stations. I turned off the faucet and listened. It was definitely coming from the kitchen. My first thought was that maybe I had knocked something loose. Maybe a surge had triggered something. But that didn't make sense. The radio was unplugged. I knew that for a fact. I'd never touched the cord. Still, I walked into the kitchen slowly, towel still in my hand, heart starting to race. And there it was. The radio was on. Dial glowing red like an ember. Static pouring from the speaker, not unbearably loud, but sharp. Enough to cut through the sound of the storm. I stared at it for a while. The dial wasn't even on a station. Just white noise, hissing. Nothing coherent. I didn't touch it, didn't move. Then, all at once, it shut off. The light faded. The static stopped. Silence returned. I backed away and left the room. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept replaying the scene in my head, trying to come up with a reason, an explanation. I told myself maybe it had some internal battery. Maybe moisture from the storm triggered a short circuit. Maybe anything. The next day, the sun came out. Everything looked normal again. I almost convinced myself it hadn't even happened. Almost because that night, just after midnight, it happened again. This time, I was sitting in the living room with a book. The rain had returned, not as hard as before, but steady enough that you could hear it in every room. And without warning, the static returned. I didn't hear it build up this time. It was just there, blasting from the kitchen. I stood up slowly. My hands were sweating. The static wasn't just white noise now. There was a pattern to it, like something was inside the static. A voice trying to push through. I took a few steps toward the kitchen, and as I turned the corner, the static cut again. Dead silence, but something else replaced it this time. A dripping sound, like water hitting metal. I flipped on the kitchen light. Nothing. The radio was off. The dial was dark. Still unplugged, but now I heard something else, a new sound, coming from under the sink. I crouched down, grabbed the cabinet handle, and opened it. There was nothing inside, just cleaning supplies and an old pipe, running into the wall. But the sound was louder now, a soft clicking, like teeth chattering. I shut the cabinet and took a step back. That's when I saw it. The cord of the radio. It was wrapped around the base of the sink, pipe tied in a knot, like someone had looped it around and pulled tight. I didn't sleep at all that night. Over the next few days, nothing else happened. I didn't hear the radio again, but I started noticing other things, little changes, things I didn't put their drawers, left open shoes I didn't remember moving, and the kitchen radio. It would be in a different position every morning, always just slightly off from where I'd left it. I eventually took it out to the shed in the backyard and locked it away. That was the only night the static came through the vents. The house had these old aluminum duct vents that carried sound like a whisper in your ear. And around 2 a.m. I heard it. "You left me here." That same voice I'd heard faintly before, now clearer. Angry, I packed a bag and slept at a friend's house the next night. A week later, I called a junk service and had the shed cleaned out. I didn't even open it, I just told them to haul everything, including the radio. I never heard the static again after that. But even now, whenever it rains, I swear I still hear a click inside the walls, like someone turning a dial. I'd just moved into a rental townhouse outside of Seattle. Nothing fancy, 2 stories, narrow floor plan. Everything creaked a little, but it was affordable, and it had its own washer-dryer unit, which, if you've ever lived in the city, is a blessing. The area was quiet, almost too quiet. Rain was a constant companion, but I didn't mind that. I actually liked the sound of rain against the windows at night. It helped me sleep, at least stuntle. It started the second week. I was there, it had been raining non-stop for days. Heavy, steady, grey skies, every hour of the day. I was home alone on a Tuesday night, sitting on the couch and watching a documentary when I heard something strange. A low groan, not from outside. From inside the walls, it sounded like an old pipe, expanding a long, slow, metallic moan, like something under pressure, straining to hold. At first, I didn't think much of it. Old houses make sounds. The plumbing creaks. You get used to it, but the sound kept coming. It would start low, then climb in pitch, a kind of long metallic screech, almost like something being pulled through the pipes, like steel dragging across steel. Then it would stop, and the silence that followed was worse. The next night, it happened again, only this time I had lasted longer. I muted the TV and walked around the living room, listening. The sound was moving. Not just a static noise from the wall, it traveled from the basement pipes up toward the kitchen, then into the ceiling, like something was crawling through them. It was unsettling, sure, but I tried to be rational. I told myself it had to be pressure in the water system. Seattle's are old pipes grown, things shift. I even Googled it. And yeah, I found articles about water, hammer, and air pockets. Made sense. Sort of, until the third night. That was when everything changed. It was a little after midnight, and the rain outside was heavier than ever. Wind howling through the alley behind the unit. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard it again. The groaning, then the screeching, then something new. A voice. It was faint, buried in the pitch and static of the pipes, but it was there. A voice, not yelling, not mumbling, screaming. I jumped up and turned off the bedroom fan so I could hear more clearly. It wasn't just a voice, it was a woman, screaming from deep inside the walls, like she was stuck inside the plumbing, being pulled by something. Her cries were desperate, distorted through the pipes, but somehow still human. I ran downstairs, completely shaken. The sound was clearest in the bathroom near the kitchen. I stood there, staring at the faucet, and the moment I touched the handle, everything stopped. Not a sound, not even the usual hum of the fridge, or the ticking of the clock. Just dead silence. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called the property manager. I didn't say anything about voices or screaming. I just said I thought the plumbing was going bad and might need inspection. He said someone would be by the following week. I didn't make it that long. That night, the fourth night, I started hearing the voice again around 2 a.m. but this time, she wasn't screaming, she was whispering. From the kitchen faucet, I got close to the sink, leaned in, and I swear to God, I heard words. You let it in, you let it in, over and over again, like a chant, like a warning. The voice was cracked and soaked in pain, but it was real. I could feel it through the steel of the sink. I turned on the faucet out of instinct, just trying to drown out the noise. The water came out black dot. It only lasted for about 2 seconds, then cleared. But what came out first wasn't dirt. It was thick, almost gelatinous, like something dead had been rotting in the pipes for years. That's when I called the police. They sent someone out to check the house. Officer didn't find anything wrong. I told him about the noises, the water, the voice, not all of it, but enough. He told me maybe it was someone outside messing with me, or an animal caught in a vent. Suggested I get the landlord to check the plumbing. I didn't bother. Instead, I grabbed my keys and spent the night in a motel across town. I came back the next morning. Everything looked fine. The house was quiet. The air smelled normal. No black water. No groaning pipes. But I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The bathroom mirror. It hadn't been before I left. I hadn't showered that morning, and in the fog, someone had traced their finger across the glass. For simple words, she's still inside here. I packed a bag and left that day. A few weeks later, I found out from a neighbor that the previous tenant had broken her lease early. She'd lived there alone. She left after reporting voices in the walls and plumbing problems. She also filed a noise complaint with the city. But here's the strange part. The file wasn't about construction or traffic. It was labeled as possible human distress, originating from water system. She never came back for her security deposit, and nobody knows where she went. This happened during a period of my life when I was moving around a lot, couch to couch, friend to friend, whatever I could afford. So when I found a third-floor apartment available for cheap in an old brick building on the edge of town, I didn't hesitate. It was fully furnished, came with a bed, a small dresser, even a sofa. The place looked a little outdated, but honestly, I didn't care. The landlord told me the last tenant left most of the furniture behind, including the bed. He said it like it was some kind of perk, like I should be grateful. Looking back, I think he left out the part that mattered. The apartment itself was small, just one bedroom, a bathroom, a narrow kitchen, and a living area with a big bay window overlooking the street. The bedroom had an old queen-sized bed with thick wooden posts, the kind that looks too heavy to ever move. Underneath it were these built-in storage drawers, deep ones. You could probably fit a full suitcase in each. The first few nights were uneventful. It rained constantly, that weak Seattle rain, where it never really pours, it just sticks around. Light tapping on the windows all day and night. I found it kind of relaxing. The bed creaked a little when I turned, but nothing unusual for old wood, until the fourth night. I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of breathing. Not mine, it was right behind me. At first, I thought maybe it was just the wind sneaking through the window cracks. But as I lay there, holding my breath, I could still hear it, slow, shallow, rhythmic, as if someone was lying in the bed with me, facing the opposite direction. I turned over quickly. Nothing. The space beside me was empty. Cold, even. I sat up, heart pounding, listening. The breathing had stopped. I thought maybe I'd been dreaming, you know. That strange half-sleep state where your brain plays tricks on you. But when I stood up, I noticed something strange. One of the storage drawers under the bed was slightly open, just an inch or two. I hadn't touched those drawers. I didn't even store anything in them. I got down and carefully pulled the drawer, opened the rest of the way, empty. But the carpet underneath it, it was disturbed, flattened, like something had been lying against it recently. I shoved the drawer closed, and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I told myself it had to have been the floor settling. Maybe I kicked it open in my sleep. Maybe the rain loosened the foundation just enough to shift the frame. I wanted to believe that. But then came the next night. I stayed up late watching videos on my phone in bed, trying to tire myself out. Around 1:30 a.m., I finally dozed off. Sometime later, I don't know exactly when I woke up with a start. The room was dark, quiet. But I felt that something was wrong. There was pressure on the mattress, as if someone had just shifted their weight on the other side of the bed. I turned on my phone light and scanned the room. Nothing, but when I looked down at the side of the bed, I saw it. A single bare footprint, right on the wooden floor, no water, no mud, just the print of a foot long, wide, faintly visible in the dust. And below it, the drawer was open again, wider this time. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen and crouched down. The drawer was pulled out almost all the way. I leaned in carefully, angling the light into the gap beneath the frame, and deep in the shadowed space, I saw movement. A hand, thin, pale, curling back into the darkness as soon as the light hit it. I dropped the flashlight, didn't even wait to grab anything. I ran out of the room and into the hallway. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely lock the bedroom door behind me. I called the police. They showed up 15 minutes later. I didn't go back in until they arrived. They checked the entire apartment under the bed, inside the walls, even the crawl space near the water heater. Nothing but when one of the officers pulled out the drawer completely. He paused. "Hey," he said, "did you know the floor's cut out under here?" I looked closer. He was right. The wood beneath the drawer had been sawed out, like a hidden hatch, and under the floor was a narrow crawl space that ran beneath the bed and toward the far wall. There were signs someone had been down there. A ratty blanket, a cracked phone, a half-empty water bottle, and a bundle of old clothes. The landlord had no idea, or at least that's what he claimed. Apparently the last tenant left abruptly, stopped paying rent, just vanished, left all the furniture behind and never came back. I moved out 2 days later. I didn't even ask for my deposit, but sometimes when I'm lying in a hotel bed or sleeping on someone's couch, I still get this eerie feeling, like there's something under me watching, waiting for me to fall asleep. This happened last fall, when I decided to take a weekend alone to work on a writing project. I'd been struggling with focus, too much noise, too much social media, too many people around. So I booked a secluded cabin up in the mountains of northern Georgia, near the edge of the Chattahoochee Forest. The listing was simple, quiet, rustic, remote. That's exactly what I wanted. I drove up on a Friday morning, through winding roads lined with trees just beginning to change colors. The rain had started lightly around noon and followed me the rest of the way. By the time I got there, everything was soaked pine needles, gravel, even the air itself. The cabin was older than I expected, but charming. It sat at the end of a gravel path, surrounded by thick trees and fog that clung low to the ground. 2 stories, narrow staircase, wood everywhere. Floors, walls, ceilings. Everything creaked, but it had power, heat, and a working fireplace. No cell signal, no internet. That was the point. I spent most of Friday getting settled, made some food, lit a fire, and opened my laptop. The rain picked up during the evening, turning into a steady downpour. Around 9 p.m., the wind howled against the windows and the trees groaned like old bones. But inside, it was peaceful, until I heard the knock. 3 loud, deliberate thumps coming from above me. From the attic, I froze. The attic. I didn't even know there was an attic. I paused my music and listened. Nothing followed. Just the rain and a bit of wind. Maybe it was the roof settling, or a branch. That's what I told myself. But then, 5 minutes later, another 3 knocks, same spot. I stood up and looked around the living room. I didn't even see an attic door. But sure enough, as I moved into the hallway by the staircase, I saw it, a square panel in the ceiling, right above the hallway. No ladder, no string, just a slightly warped piece of plywood. I grabbed a chair from the kitchen and climbed up, pressing my hand against the panel. It was ice cold. Kay gave it a gentle push. It barely budged. The space above it was pitch black. No light, no vents. Just silence. I left it alone, went back to my desk. A couple hours later, I turned in for the night. At exactly 2:03 a.m., I woke up to footsteps, not downstairs, not outside, directly above me. Slow, heavy, uneven. Someone or something was walking across the attic floor, right above the bedroom. I held my breath and sat up, the sheets clinging to my skin. The footsteps stopped. Then the knock came again, not on the ceiling this time. On the wall beside me, 3 dull thumps, inches from where my head had just been. I grabbed my phone and remembered. No signal. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed in bed with my flashlight, heart racing, waiting for morning. As soon as the sun started rising, I got dressed, grabbed my keys, and went to the kitchen to make coffee and calm myself. That's when I noticed something. The attic panel was open, just a few inches hanging down at an angle, barely visible if you weren't looking directly at it. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't heard it move, but something had opened it. I packed my bag, tossed it in the car, and drove straight back to town. A few days later, I messaged the host through the rental site, asking if the attic was being used for storage or maintenance. He responded quickly. The cabin doesn't have an attic, just insulation space above the ceiling beams. There's no access point inside. I sent him a photo of the panel, no reply. I checked the listing again the next day. It had been taken down, no trace of it. No host name, no address, nothing to this day. I still don't know what was walking above me that night, or how it knocked from the attic if there wasn't one, but I do know this. It knew exactly where I was. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss another night of terror. We post true horror stories, real encounters, and the unexplained. And remember, what's waiting in the dark might already know your name. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay safe, stay alert, and whatever you do, don't turn around.